Hello there my RPG lovers and welcome to another video. Soldak Entertainment is a small studio from USA that's been making niche RPGs ever since 2004. I honestly don't know how I never heard about any of these games before. I covered a lot of RPGs and action adventures in my Hidden Gems or Trash series. I usually do a decent amount of research about obscure games and you guys have a ton of suggestions in the comments. But I don't believe I ever saw a single recommendation for any of these games, and I check those comments on a daily basis. I accidentally stumbled upon the game called Dean's Legacy, and then I checked the whole franchise from the studio. Starting from the first game they released in 2004, all the way to the latest release in 2021. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my experience with all of these games, and why I think they deserve a lot more attention from RPG lovers. Depths of Peril came out in 2007 and it was the first game from this humble little studio. This game is described as a single-player RPG with strong strategy elements. Naturally, I was really skeptical about that before I started playing and I didn't expect much from this game in general. But I was wrong. Depths of Peril is one of the most enjoyable ARPGs that I played in recent memory. Simply because the game truly lives up to that description, especially the strategy parts. Looks can be deceiving, and that's certainly the case with Depths of Peril. In fact, that's pretty much the case with all Soldak Entertainment RPGs, which is a shame. I can see why a lot of people would take one glance at this game and not even consider playing it. The animations seem very simplistic and primitive, and the gameplay looks extremely janky because of this. You would not be wrong to assume this, because that's exactly what this game is, although I'm going to try and explain why that doesn't matter a lot. I mean, sure, the fidelity is pretty low, but artistic style is not bad at all if you ask me. I was able to run it in 4K, and surprisingly, the game scales fine on such high resolutions. Although you have to set up your desktop resolution to at least Full HD before you try and change the game's resolution. Otherwise, you can have some visual issues when you start the game. I really like how Soldak Entertainment uses the color in this game. The color palette is very vibrant, which creates a nice and cozy atmosphere in the game. Exploring different maps is very pleasant because of this, and all areas have a distinct vibe and feel to them. Not only when it comes to open areas, even the dungeons have a really cool look. But you won't play this game because of how it looks, let's be honest. Depths of Peril has a very unique gameplay formula, which mixes ARPG features with strategy and even MOBA elements, I would say. You start the game by choosing your character class and creating a new world. Some of these options were confusing the first time I played, and I made some crucial mistakes. You can set up the level of Covenant's power, the aggression, and the world difficulty. The Covenant power setting is what I got completely wrong because I selected 95. I totally underestimated the difficulty and I quickly learned that the hard way. What this actually means is that NPCs from enemy Covenant will start on this level, which puts you in a huge disadvantage. So you should try to keep this setting close to normal or high. When you start the game, you spawn in your house. All Covenants in the game have their own house in the village. You can control the number of Covenants from those settings we just talked about, and there seems to be a very decent amount of them. Each time you start the game, you'll get a different mix of Covenants with unique status effects, which can change their behavior in a way. Ultimately, the main goal of this game is to gain the control of the village and become one and only leader. You can win the game in a couple of different ways, but the most obvious one is to defeat other Covenants in power ranking. You'll gain influence and power as you do quests and recruit NPCs in your Covenants. Strategy features have a very decent amount of depth. You can make diplomacy deals, trade, or even adventure together with other Covenants. It's really damn cool. It's not that hard to understand the strategy elements once you start playing the game. It's far from being complicated, even though it might seem like that at first. The thing is, I didn't learn anything from my first playthrough because I was playing as a total jerk. Every time when some powerful Covenant demanded something, I just told them to f*** off. That was pretty much a f*** around and find out situation. I failed to realize that the game will end if your lifestone gets destroyed. That's one of those MOBA elements that I mentioned, and it works surprisingly very good in this game. Same goes for other covenants. If you manage to destroy the life stone in their house, well, they lose, to say the least. The game gives you many different ways to get to that point, either through sheer power of your covenant, diplomacy, and your general relationship with other covenants. You can try to raid covenants with another friendly covenant or alone, or start a rumor which will negatively affect their influence. Speaking of which, one of your main goals is to gain influence in crystals. With enough influence, you can get better deals with covenants, and with enough crystals, you can recruit powerful guards for your house. And you can also find NPCs in the open world or doing quests in the village. I can't stress enough how alive this world feels, because there is so much going on in the village and the open world as well. These systems would put many modern ARPGs to shame. Not to mention that this is a very unique mix of genres, and we all know that AAA studios will not even dare to try something similar, especially today. They would rather play it very safe, but we still have many aspiring indie developers that are willing to experiment. I really had troubles to wrap my head around this, because if we compare these gameplay features to most modern ARPGs, Depths of Peril will totally blow them away. Quests are very dynamic and the AI is very smart. There is only a certain amount of quests that you can take at once, and you can also fail quests. Other covenants will try to do the same thing as you. You'll find them in the open world fighting monsters and trying to recruit NPCs. Monsters can organize packs and become much stronger. There are some events in the village that will happen occasionally, and there is so much going on between the covenants in general. You can keep up with those activities by just looking at the history tab. You'll constantly receive offers from covenants, and the way they talk to you depends on your current relationship status. So what about the RPG side of things and the action gameplay? Well, the action itself is very underwhelming because of the extremely janky nature of this gameplay. It takes a while to get used to, but even this aspect of the gameplay was very enjoyable for me. The itemization is done very good in this game, the open world is fun to explore, and killing things becomes more enjoyable when you gain some levels. The character progression is not that deep like the strategy elements of the game, but it's good enough to make a decent build. I played as a warrior and I focused on two-handed weapons. Getting a powerful item will immediately affect your gameplay, so there is certainly a nice sense of progression. You get to take one follower with you, and they also level up. You can give them items or send them to defend your house. The zones that you can explore have enemies with different levels, and the difficulty really picks up around level 10. Speaking of character levels, if you lose the game, you don't lose your character unless you play in hardcore. This means that you can create a new world, select the level of the Covenant again, and use the same character. You get to keep all of your items and the progression, you only reset the open world and all the Covenants. The first time I died, I got roasted by the game so hard. You're dead, really dead this time, loser. You've lost the chance to rule Jorvik. Despite your pathetic skills, we may still survive this war. Can you do better? I love this fucking developer. Speaking of how the dialogue works in this game, you'll find some hilarious responses for the Covenants, especially if you're on bad terms with them. How do you like this? We still won't like you. I found it really interesting how you need to balance out the open world exploration and quests, along with managing your Covenant and everything that happens in Jorvik. I did have some issues with the gameplay though, mostly on the fundamental level. The janky gameplay didn't bother me that much because the speed of the gameplay is on the slower side, so you don't need to have any twitchy reactions. However, I did find it really annoying sometimes when you have to click on something specific. When you have a big fight between the Covenants, it's almost impossible to click on a specific enemy. To make things even worse, the "Path is blocked" message will be on the screen more often than not. The pathing issues are a pretty big problem in this game, and you can usually only interact with NPCs that are very close to you. I praised the dungeons before, but some of them have a very annoying design, with bunch of narrow areas where you just hit the dead end. Besides that, I really don't have any major critiques. Depths of Peril has an insane replay value, which is also worth mentioning. I'll happily come back to this game and do another playthrough. The best thing about it, you have total control when it comes to the general length of the playthrough by just messing around with the settings. And I love that you just continue to improve your character no matter if you win or lose. I'm a huge fan of consistent progression in ARPGs, so this is music to my ears. You can always try out another class though, which I plan to do in my free time. I highly recommend checking out this hidden gem of an RPG. I would really like to see a remaster of this game with better graphics and animations while keeping the gameplay system intact. One can hope, right? In 2008, Soldak Entertainment released their second game called Kivi's Underworld. This game was a hack-and-slash RPG, and it focused more on the action rather than strategy elements that Soldak introduced with their previous game. This is the only game from Soldak that you can't buy nowadays. It's not on GOG and it's not on Steam, but you can order a physical release from their official website. I actually want to order all of their games from the website now that I played all of them. That would be a very cool and niche collection of RPGs. So I couldn't find a digital version of this game anywhere on the internet, and I even tried some pirated versions that don't work. Then I found out there is a demo that you can download from their official website. Now, I tried really hard to get this demo to work for about 2 hours, but I had no luck at all. No matter what I did, I only got a black screen when I started the game. After failing to find a fix for this, I had to give up and move on to the next game. The next game from Soldak will have the same formula as Kivi's Underworld. In 2010, they released a game called Dean's Curse. Just as the previous game, Dean's Curse focused on hack and slash side of things, and it's more like a dungeon crawler game. I wasn't sold on this idea at first, because I know the biggest weakness of the first game was the action combat itself. However, Soldak improved the fundamental mechanics a lot in this game. The animations are much smoother and the action feels way better in general. It was still not even close to some other ARPGs from that time period, to be honest, but that doesn't matter a lot. Everything in this game seems very familiar if you played Depths of Peril. Even the beginning of the game has similar features like creating the world and selecting different gameplay settings. A bunch of assets have been reused for this game, like UI features, textures and so on. But like I said, this game also has some major improvements compared to Depths of Peril. The movement feels more precise and you won't get stuck like in the first game. That's a really important gameplay improvement because the game focuses a lot more on action. There is no open world like in the first game or those strategy elements that I heavily praised. Some of the gameplay elements from the first game are still present. Things can happen in your village while you're dungeon crawling, and once again, they try to make the world feel alive. It's not to the same extent like in Depths of Peril, but still, it's a really nice touch. The main goal of this game is to save the village. You get a dungeon full of monsters with many different levels, and you also have quests to solve within the dungeon. All of those features can be controlled and tweaked before you start the game. The philosophy of character progression is very similar like before. Once again, I played a warrior that focuses on two-handed weapons. The skills are very similar, but there are some new abilities. Speaking of new things, the presentation is a bit better. For example, the elemental effects on weapons is a very nice addition, and the whole UI system looks more slick and it highlights the most important stats. Other than that, it's pretty much the same like before. Which is good because the itemization in their games is great in general. Don't try to fix what's not broken, right? My first completed playthrough only took about 2 hours, but that's because I played on normal difficulty. The thing is, Dean's Curse also has an insanely high replay value. You can find people on Steam with over 200 hours. And it seems like this game is fan favorite, judging by the reception. Each time you start a new game you'll get different quests, dungeons and monsters to kill. That being said, I have to admit that I was thinking about the first game a lot while I was playing Dean's Curse. That's because I was hoping that this game will be even more similar to the first one. I expected to see better action gameplay mechanics, which this game definitely has. However, the strategy features and the open world was a huge thing in the first game. Dean's Curse doesn't have an amazing action gameplay, which would perhaps justify the lack of strategy features and the open world. I did enjoy my time with this game though, but the entire time I was thinking about replaying the first game again. Luckily for me, the next game from Soldak will bring back some of those features and even more. Drox Operative came out in 2012. Up to this point, Soldak Entertainment had 3 games under their belt, which were really similar in many ways. This time around, Soldak wanted to try out something a bit different, but still keep the familiar gameplay formula from previous games. Drox Operative is a space action RPG with similar strategy elements that we could see in Depths of Peril. It's exactly what I wanted to see in Dean's Curse, well, almost. I'm not exactly crazy about space settings in RPGs or games in general. As you probably know, I'm more of a medieval fantasy guy, but that doesn't mean I hate space settings. I would just prefer a medieval one in my RPGs. Anyway, Soldak didn't only include the same strategy features from the previous game, they actually improved and added a lot more options. The core of this system is pretty much the same, so if you played Depths of Peril, these features will definitely feel familiar. However, I have to say that I felt a bit overwhelmed in the beginning of the game. This is maybe because I haven't played anything similar in recent memory and it took a while to get used to the gameplay. Speaking of which, you start the game almost exactly the same like in all Soldak RPGs, surprise surprise. The only bad thing about this would be if the systems were actually bad, but it's far from that. On the contrary, they were great and it's fun to play around with them. If it happens that you really like some of these games, you'll get a very powerful tool to shape your next playthrough in many different ways and make it unique. What's not to like about that? Instead of your character class, you get to choose a ship. There are 10 different races with unique gameplay benefits and a simple lore behind them. In my first playthrough, I selected the race which sounds the coolest to me, and that would be the Drek. The aggressive flying dragon man. Are you kidding me? Of course I'm playing as those guys. Instead of creating a world, you create a sector with a couple of different optional settings. Once again, my ego got the best of me and I selected the hard difficulty. In my defense, I thought level 4 will not be that hard to handle, but I was wrong. I was getting demolished left and right, even in the first sector. The sector is the only one map in the galaxy, but you will be able to discover other sectors which have their own unique races and planets to discover. The thing is, you're not playing as a major faction in Drox Operative. You're essentially just a space mercenary and you decide who to work with. The old questing system from Depths of Peril is back, with some quality of life improvements, like being able to complete a quest just from this menu. This is something that all future games from Soldak will implement as well. Getting quests is also streamlined, and you can do this by just opening the Relationships tab. You will also notice a couple of more options that are pretty self-explanatory. The strategy features are very enjoyable to mess around with, but I can see how this could be very confusing if this is your first Soldak RPG. As for the RPG features, you have leveling up and increasing different stats for your ship. You get a couple of different shields that enemies have to burn through before you take some actual damage. Dying is pretty common in this game, so it shouldn't stress you out too much. Unless you want to play on hardcore or semi-hardcore. Yeah, that's a thing in this game as well, and it sounds pretty cool actually. Your death can still be permanent in semi-hardcore, but certain conditions have to be met. Soldak will just continue implementing various options that can put a unique twist on your playthrough, and this is only one of them. Your ship has 3 different component features, and this is essentially a progression system in this game. The itemization is based around these 3 component types, but you will have to balance out the power load which large components have. There are different missiles, lasers and similar weapon components to find, and all of them require some specific stat that you can increase by leveling up. The action gameplay is obviously very different this time around, but it's also pretty simple. Your ship will automatically target the nearest enemy, you just have to press the attack button. You can also target specific enemy ships with your mouse, and the targeting system works fine this time around. They came a long way from Depths of Peril and that horrendous pathing and targeting system. The variety of your attacks will depend on components that you have equipped. I gave up on my first playthrough because I made the game worse for myself with the difficulty. On my second playthrough, I played with the human race. Human race starts with some very useful mine components, which creates a nice cat and mouse gameplay loop. You'll have to maneuver the ship with WASD, and the controls feel okay for this type of gameplay. Discovering planets will reward you with some loot, as well as destroying ships and solving quests. The diplomacy features are there, and they're even better this time around. I was surprised how quick some of the races got destroyed in my first playthrough. The unpredictable nature of the AI is one of the things which makes these games very fun to experience. It can also be very frustrating sometimes though. And of course, once again, the replay value is extremely strong, so if you end up liking the game, you can play it for hundreds of hours. Soldak would once again experiment a little bit with different game settings, and that's how we got Zombasite in 2016. Zombasite was the fourth game from this amazing little studio. At first, I wasn't that excited to play this game because of the whole zombie premise. I got tired of zombie games like 10 years ago.
Hey Joe, you wanna play a zombie game?
The thing is, Zombasite is not completely revolved around zombie invasions or zombies in general. This game is almost exactly what I wanted to see in Dean's Curse. It has strategy elements of Depths of Peril and slightly improved action gameplay of Dean's Curse. Maybe this is getting a bit confusing to follow, but just remember that all of these games share the exact same idea with some interesting twists and turns. Zombasite started very strong, and I noticed some cool new classes that I wanted to try out. So I started the game as a Death Knight, and I really like this class. Every class in this game has 3 different skill trees. You can even make a hybrid class and get to mix and match skill trees from all playable classes. Right after you start the game, you spawn in your home base. It's much bigger than before, and there is a legit gameplay reason for that. Clan management is a big part of this game. You'll gather resources like food and items for the characters in your clan, send your clan members on different expeditions, and so on. The strategy features are stronger than ever before, and more importantly, the presentation makes them very easy to understand. When this zombie bar fills up, there is a high chance that your base will get attacked, or that some other random event happens nearby. And of course, you can also get attacked by different clans if your relationship status is low. This time around, you can find stronger doors to put on your base and send NPCs to gather more guards. When someone attacks your clan, it almost feels like a full-blown siege. I also participated in other sieges between the clans, and it's pretty damn cool. When I started the game, I got the option to select the size of the world map. Naturally, I selected the biggest option, and goddamn, the map is really big. It's still divided by different square zones, just like in Depths of Peril, but it's much bigger. The number of quests you can take at once is a bit bigger now, but I also noticed that I started failing quests left and right. Probably because I focused a bit more on random exploration on the map and doing whatever the quest is the closest in the zone that I'm currently in. What bothered me in the beginning is the zombie curse, which many zombie NPCs can inflict. There are 2 stages of this curse, and when you hit stage 2, you start taking damage. Even the zombie NPCs won't attack you anymore, and you can't attack them. There are a couple of ways to make this mechanic less tedious, and as you play the game more, it almost becomes irrelevant, so it's not a huge deal. When you get killed by some monsters, there is a chance they'll get promoted to an even bigger and stronger monster, which is pretty cool. Some of the NPCs can turn into ghosts when you kill them, so you have to kill them again. This caught me by surprise a little bit when one of my NPCs from the clan became insane and started fighting us. Yeah, you'll find similar new mechanics in every new game from Soldak. You have to manage the clan features on a fairly regular basis in Zombasite. There is a happiness and insane stat for your NPCs, which every now and then needs to be checked. Otherwise, this can happen. You'll need to explore the world and recruit more NPCs and give them different assignments in the clan. Once again, you can take followers with you and they're extremely strong, just like in the first game. You have a bit more options when you manage their gear compared to previous games. The action combat is very similar to Dean's Curse, but it does feel a bit better. Like I said, I like the Death Knight class a lot, but besides a couple of unique spells, he doesn't feel that different compared to a warrior. The hack and slash combat in this game is good enough to keep me playing and progressing. Speaking of which, there are a couple of ways to lose or win the game if certain conditions are met. I came really close to diplomacy win in my first playthrough. I managed to befriend every single clan that I met, and they also became friends with each other. The problem is, there were still clans that I haven't even met yet, even after 10 hours of gameplay. Like I said, if you select a huge world, that's what you get. You need to do a lot of exploring and find all the clans. Just like in Drox Operative, at least a couple of clans got destroyed before I even met them. But still, there were plenty of clans left to discover. I also came pretty close to lose the game very early on. The Lizardman almost burned my whole freaking clan, but I managed to repel the attack. If your Hearthstone gets destroyed, it's game over for you, and same goes for other clans. My so-called strategy in all of these games is usually to befriend everyone before I strategically destroy them one by one. Zombasite has even more features when it comes to this. You can start a rumor or try to sabotage the clan in a couple of different ways. Then I try to convince another clan to join me and destroy another clan. That's just one of the ways you can approach the gameplay, and I found it very fun. Since I always start the game in a handicap, because I select higher levels for the enemies, I can't exactly brute force the win from the very beginning. The whole zombie team is like whatever, but everything else got improved in a way. I was kinda struggling to figure out why this game got worse reception in general compared to other Soldak RPGs. Some people think the balancing of the game is all over the place, but you can make the same argument about all of these games. And again, you can directly control a lot of gameplay settings before you start the game. Even when you lose, I never felt like it's very frustrating because you continue with the same character and make a new world. Come to think of it, this is very similar to some roguelite RPGs as well. Overall, I would certainly recommend this game. In 2019, Soldak released another Dean's game, Dean's Legacy. Dean's games are focused more on the action side of things. The first game was a dungeon crawler action RPG with some light strategy elements from Soldak previous games. The first game seemed like a fan favorite, but I honestly didn't like it that much, it just didn't click with me. However, the second game is a major improvement. This game looks almost exactly the same like Zombasite. The visuals and the presentation is pretty much the same, if not a bit more vibrant. The open world looks very nice, and the variety of zones you're going to explore is very good. There is even some verticality this time around, so it doesn't feel like you're constantly exploring flat open fields. The vegetation is very lush, and I really like some of the dungeon design as well. Some dungeons look like full-blown underground cities, which is really damn cool. On the other side, this can also create some annoying camera issues, because the transparency of objects is not the best in this game. Overall, I really enjoyed the visuals of this game, because the art style has noticeably improved, even though the fidelity is still pretty low in general. More importantly, the gameplay in Dean's Legacy feels like a proper ARPG that you can play for action itself. That's one of the problems that I had with Dean's Curse. The action gameplay wasn't good enough by itself to keep the game interesting for me. The gameplay in Dean's Legacy can be very fast-paced, and this time around I play as a ranged character. The most impressive thing about this game is the progression system, which is totally different than before. If I'm not mistaken, this game has around 39 different classes that you can play, which is totally insane. But that's not all, there is a gameplay feature called Mutations, which puts a unique twist to how you progress your character. No matter which class you select in the beginning, as you level up you'll also get mutation points. Then you can use these points to get skills from totally different classes. There is an RNG aspect when it comes to this, but there is also a guaranteed chance to get a specific skill and keep the existing ones as well. I started as a ranger, then mutated to archer and reaver. The idea is to check all the skills from different classes, see what you like, and use the mutate points to try and get those specific skills. Each time you mutate, you also get a unique skill, which can improve some of your existing abilities. For example, my archer uses a fire trap, and I got mutation that makes this ability do earthquakes sometimes. It seems like the player has a huge amount of different builds to try out in this game, and that's certainly one of the main appeals of Dean's Legacy. The open world is fun to explore, and there are plenty of different enemy types to kill. We have the same gameplay elements for creating the world as you probably expect by now. As always, there are different clans to discover, and the relationship tab which keeps the track of every clan. However, Dean's Legacy doesn't have all the strategy features from Zombasite. You won't need to manage your clan like you did in the previous game, and some of those features are missing. I guess this is because the developer wants you to focus more on action and building your character in this game rather than on those strategy elements. The win and lose conditions are very simple as well. Just like in the first game, sometimes your main objective is to defend the village or some specific NPCs from the village. But it's not always the same, sometimes you need to kill a specific enemy in order to win the game. Dean's Legacy also has a multiplayer co-op features. I forgot to mention that all of these games, except Depths of Peril, have multiplayer co-op features. Overall, I would really recommend Dean's Legacy, especially if you like to focus a lot more on character builds and customization. The gameplay in Dean's Legacy is very addictive. I caught myself thinking about playing this game at least for an hour or two every day while I was working on this video, so take that as you will. Drox Operative 2 came out in 2021 and is the latest game from the studio. I really don't have much to say about this game, but that's not because it's bad. Quite the opposite, it's another very good game from Soldak Entertainment. But it's almost exactly the same like the first Drox Operative, with some notable quality of life improvements and better presentation. Everything I said about the first game can be used here as well. However, I immediately noticed that controlling your ship is much more responsive and snappy. It seems like the speed of the ship is the main factor here. The sequel starts with much higher default speed of the ship, which makes controlling the ship way better than before. Other than that, I honestly didn't notice any major changes. As always, you will definitely find some new small features and you'll be able to tell the difference if you played the first game. The textures in this game are much sharper and they have high resolution. This makes the game look way better than Drox Operative 1. The presentation in general is better as well. You'll notice more sleek UI features like the race tab. To put it simply, if you're interested in playing these games, feel free to skip Drox Operative 1 and go straight for the sequel. It's better in every possible way. This little studio has been making games ever since 2004 and I'm honestly surprised I never heard about them. I am very impressed by what they managed to achieve so far and it's obvious they have a small but loyal fan base that keep buying these games. I don't think any of these games are bad, but they are certainly very niche. Soldak basically created a unique genre of RPGs with a mix of RTS and roguelike features. If it happens that you like one of these games, you're probably going to like all of them. It goes the other way around as well, but I heavily recommend trying out at least some of these games. My personal favorites are Depths of Peril, Zombasite and Dean's Legacy. If you want an ARPG that focuses on action and build variety, go with Dean's Legacy. If you want more strategy features on top of it, go with Zombasite. Depths of Peril is also a great starting point if you don't mind the jankiness and the age of the game. And of course, we should not forget Drox Operative. If you like what I had to say about those games, just go with Drox Operative 2. I'll have GOG links for all of these games, so feel free to use them. I tried getting a discount for you guys, but at the time of this recording, I'm really not sure what's going to happen, so I apologize for that. Make sure to check the pinned comment where I post updates about stuff like that. Did you play any of these games before, and if you did, which one is your favorite? Leave a comment down below. If you want to support the channel, liking the video and subscribing would mean a lot. And if you want to support my channel, maybe you can get yourself a cool C4G t-shirt. I just made a bunch of new cool designs. You can always become a Patreon or a YouTube member if that's what you prefer. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is to watch the video and subscribe. Many thanks to all of my current supporters, and I'll see you in the next one.